Afternoon. I'd like to call our special council meeting of Wednesday, August 5th to order at 3:30 p.m. and want to acknowledge that we're holding today's meeting in the ancestral lands of the Wasanish First Nations. And I'd look for approval of the agenda that it be approved with the addition of a public participation period today.
So moved.
Seconded by Terry.
Yes, and then I have a comment to make. Or
okay, well,
on the agenda.
The motion's on the floor. I'll let you comment, Council.
Okay, thank you. There are just a couple things that I was proposing to add that kind of arise out of the minutes. There was an item that the task force mentioned in their minutes about the accommodation sector. So I'd like to have a short discussion on that. And then also a discussion about I don't know, I guess I would call it governance issues between the EAC and the task force.
Okay, we can end, I will add that as new business before adjournment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. And so I would now like to open public participation and invite, we do have a speaker, Mr. David Cavally, today, and we will welcome him in just momentarily. Good afternoon, Mr. Cavally. We have begun public participation. We welcome you this afternoon, and you have the floor.
And you're muted at the moment.
Can you unmute, David?
There we go. Sorry, I only just joined. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to, if possible, begin my comments by saying thank you to all of you for the opportunity to speak and for the confidence you've placed in me. It's a little bit humbling to find myself appointed to 3 town committees. I only hope I can live up to the expectations, but I'll do my best. But it's from that helicopter perspective I'd like to offer my comments today as you consider input from both the EAC and from the task force. Let me just say that I believe the support from the EOC during the initial stages of the pandemic was exemplary. It was a job well done. And part of that process was to survey the residents of Sydney and surrounding areas. And I've read all the responses, there was a lot of them, and I read the summary from the staff. And it's clear that community resilience, that collective mental health of the community, needs to be reinforced. And the message, although the future is certain, we have a safe community, we'll build back better, and that resources are available to help all of us, needs to be spread through the community and use a wide range of approaches. And I believe that by doing this, we'll support the mental health of the community and at the same time assist with the economic recovery. It's the same approach as is used by Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix, and it's very effective. So you've got recommendation R2 before you today from the task force. And I think the task force agreed that in-person approach to community engagement would be a valuable addition to the online messaging that's been implemented. The town has not only got to act, but it's got to be publicly seen to be acting. And in addition, I really believe, and equally important, the town must provide a mechanism for continual feedback on their efforts. You've got to keep a finger on the pulse to complement those periodic surveys and allow for proactive measures when we hear things are not quite right. This is not a situation that's going to disappear magically. It's not a Trump-like optimism that in a couple of months we're all going to be back to it. I mean, Dr. Tam has warned we're in for the long haul. And I think as the days of summer end, I think frustrations will mount. Those street demonstrations are not only over the border, but they're also in Canada. And that's a lot of pressure in society. So what do we know for the situation? We have a well-informed task force. Their terms of reference prompt them to make recommendations to council. That's as it should be, and I am certainly not advocating any change. What I'm asking for is maybe a speed up of the process. If I look at R2, I think as a suggestion, and with obvious clear hindsight, which we all have, this resolution perhaps should have read, moved by S. Duck, seconded by B. Fallett, that this task force recommends to council a working group, blah, 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 blah. That would mean that council's role would then simply be to pass a resolution that they see merit in the recommendation, and that the action should be taken as soon as practicable. There's no need to send it back to the task force, get into a discussion about whether this or that piece of information should be included or excluded, who does the printing. All of those details can be left to the working group. Changes, they're going to be necessary as we move on and we get experience. We can live with this. So, all right, if we've got an action, who's got to implement it? I mean, we clearly, this is a situation nobody planned for, so there's no blame. We just have to think, how can we get around this? And my thought is the town should delegate, not abdicate, but delegate the implementation of those initiatives to one or more local organisations. And I'm using the example of the Sydney BIA. I picked them because they're well organised, they have a proven track record. That was demonstrated when they worked with the EAC. They're able to act quickly, decisively, to respond to the, almost daily changes we've got. And I think given the right resources, they provide an excellent partnership. So in my concept, they would be given broad guidance by council members based on recommendations from the task force and provided with a generous operating budget to enable them to bolster their resources, primarily staffing. They'd need to do that. COVID-19 is not currently within their mandate. And of course, the budget would be accounted for at some point in the future. Do you know, as a close, I'd like to pass on something that came from a 3-week seminar for new CEOs. It was at the University of Chicago Business School, and I attended it in 1988. And if you think of the council as being the CEO of Sydney, this came and it says, and I quote, "Your job as a CEO is to provide direction, hire good, competent people, tell them the objective, empower them to reach it without you, give them the necessary resources, set a timeline, and go away. If you hired the right people, you won't have to worry about accountability." And I printed that and I put it on my office wall when I ran a business. And when I drifted into the weeds and I had an overwhelming urge to micromanage, my PA or my VPs would smile at me and point to it so that I didn't forget. I think this is a good time for that. So appreciate it. And I once again appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'll switch now to the regular transmission, which for me is not working. So hopefully I can watch the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. Thank you, Mr. Calverley, for attending this today's meeting and giving us your remarks.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I'd now like to bring public participation to a close. We do have committee reports to receive and discuss today with recommendations, and I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, liaison to the Economic Advisory Committee with regards to those minutes and recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For starters, I'll move that the minutes of the July 10th meeting be received.
Second.
Any discussion? Call a question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to recommendation 1, I spoke to this at the previous council meeting just to plant the seed with council and staff as well, certainly, that the committee had fairly detailed discussion around this particular item. So I'll move the motion and then look to speak to it. The recommendation reads that the town set as a priority advocating on behalf of business for increased, improved internet and cell capacity.
Second.
I have a second. Please continue, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item really stems from feedback from business owners who participate on the committee, and looking at the way in which business, and not just business, but for members of our community at large, be they students, be they individuals who did work from home or who are now working from home, have experienced some challenges with respect to items like their internet capabilities and capacity that the town certainly currently realizes without having the benefit of fiber optic throughout the community, as an example. It seems comparatively the municipality is underserved compared to our neighbors with respect in particular to fiber optic. And so this was the real catalyst behind the motion. It led to some discussion as well around just cell capacity and looking at how on occasion from areas on the city's waterfront, for example, how cell signals will be stronger from the United States and that phones will roam on occasion. And so that might be an item that can be addressed as well to help enable the community either work from home or study from home, and frankly, to help local businesses and their presence on the internet. And if you look over to West Sydney and some of the more international oriented businesses and their ability to provide, improved upload speeds for some of their data, not to mention download speeds. So I want to provide that context, Mr. Mayor, and I certainly support the motion from the committee.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A little over a month ago, Shaw announced the availability of fiber optic internet in Sydney. I upgraded, and I checked before the meeting. I tried 5 different addresses in the West Sydney industrial area, and Shaw tells me that fiber optic internet is available at all of those. TELUS still does not have fiber optic in Sydney yet, but if you check their website, they say they have plans. They'll get to us. So I'm I appreciate that the survey was done in a period before Shaw announced the rollout of their fiber optic. And I'm not sure whether the EAC actually met before the announcement or not, because it was pretty close to that. But the situation has obviously changed. And while I do think fiber optic internet is important, and that that cell coverage and particularly the concern about roaming is important, I'm just a little bit hesitant about making the fiber optic internet a priority for advocating, because basically that would mean advocate to TELUS.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Duncan, and back to Councillor O'Toole.
I didn't know about Shaw, but thanks, Councillor Wainwright, for that. But I did have a similar concern about what our capacity was as a local government in terms of advocating. And I guess my question would be perhaps to staff, like, who would we advocate to? Would that be, I know that the province has got some plans in place to increase connectivity in different parts of the province. I believe cell phone coverage maybe is a federal jurisdiction. So I'm not sure in terms of who we would advocate to and what amount of influence we would actually have. So maybe a question back to Councillor O'Toole and perhaps to staff if they have any insight on any of that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn to staff first. Mr. Humble, if you.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, it's a good question. We're, at least I'm not aware of who we'd advocate to. I assume we'd be advocating to the major service providers, i.e. being Shaw and TELUS. I know we've had meetings with them in the past, and I'm not aware of a particular government agency that we would advocate to, at least not right now anyways.
Okay, separating the question a little bit with regards to the fiber optic and cell phone, would cell phone have different providers apart from the infrastructure that's provided, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor. We'd
Okay.
have to look into it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't have the answers right now.
Okay, no, that's fine. Councillor Toole, did you wish to respond?
Yeah, I think so. I might cross over into addressing Councillor Wainwright's comments as well, and I would just suggest that we've heard from the business community that this is an area that requires attention. In terms of who we advocate to, it's obviously the industry providers, and we let them know that we want to see improved levels of service in Sydney. Whether they deliver or not is immaterial. I'm not talking about one provider versus another. We just make it known that it's part of Build Back Better. Look, we're looking to improve upon what's here. Frankly, I think it's an excellent initiative for us to embrace that supports the likes of retailers looking to try and provide their services online. Parents who are dealing with students potentially at home and trying to study. These are improvements that cross throughout our community. And so what we're doing as a town is looking to reach out to those providers and ask them, how can we provide better services? How can we support you to bring those services to our community? I get that it's a free enterprise business. They're in North Saanich, they're in Central Saanich with a level of service that we haven't seen in Sydney until apparently recently, although I haven't seen any. I'm a Shaw customer. I haven't seen anything from Shaw about offering fiber optic to my office location in Sydney. So let's reach out. It's a fairly simple request from the EAC, one of the more tangible requests I've seen, and I certainly continue to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan and then Councillor Fallett.
Thank you. I think I shared some of the misgivings that Councillor O'Keefe brought up and Councillor Wainwright, where I'm trying to think of it like a utility, a service that a town would provide. And this is such a relatively recent one. It feels like roads or hydro, the way, it would have been when that first started coming in, and thinking, what would a town do? And what we do when we want to build a road is we kind of put out a request, and we have whoever wants to offer their services to build that, bring that in. And I feel like are other service providers who aren't Shaw unaware that their customers in Sydney require this additional service? So I'm just trying to think about how a town would put out that tender without specifically asking private companies in a way we would not do with other private companies to provide a bid that isn't going around competition issues that we have with other similar private companies. And I know that people have complained about the differences in providers in town for a long time. I know, for example, my mom's cell phone doesn't work in my house. There is no service whatsoever, but mine does. So that's just a matter of, I had to pick the service provider who deigned to offer service in my area. And it has worked for me all over town using my personal business, which is mobile. However, my cell phone contract uses TELUS as its hardware that's throughout the town. My provider is different. And so with cell phone, we're going to run into that problem where people are going to have different providers, but it's really only Shaw or TELUS who are providing our hardware. So I think, as Councillor Rintoul was saying, it comes down to us having the town going out and deliberately courting TELUS to put infrastructure into our town. And I'm just wondering how that works with procurement issues? I guess that might be partially a question back to staff again, but I see Councillor Wainwright has an answer as well.
Okay, I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright before Councillor Fallot if you wish to address that particular point, Councillor Wainwright.
I'm thinking of, well, there was, the conversation is starting to track towards an in-camera meeting that happened in the previous council term. And I should leave it at that. But it would be good to follow up with the rest of council to brief on that particular meeting, which was a while ago, because it is relevant to the conversation we're having. So I'll just stop at that. I will comment that there are some municipalities in BC who've approached the improved internet sort of access differently, Campbell River being an example. And the municipality actually rolled out their own fiber infrastructure, and they lease capacity to the internet providers, just in the same way that Shaw leases capacity to some of the other smaller providers locally. So what happened was the municipality basically stepped up and said, well, we'll take that role. It's a bit late for us to be looking at that because Shaw's now got fiber throughout Sydney. And, you know, I honestly don't know what TELUS's plans are, but generally what happens is that the smaller providers lease capacity from the bigger ones. And even Shaw leases some from TELUS, and TELUS leases some from Shaw. Anyway, I can support staff spending some time to look into this, but I don't see making this a high priority that would involve a lot of staff time, particularly since Shaw is now offering the fiber internet in Sydney. And I can't, you know, comment about whether businesses got contacted by them or not, but I got an email from Shaw saying, you know, this is available, here are your options for upgrading. And I did. So I'm now on quite a bit faster.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Fallot, and then I'll wish to speak, and then I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the concept has merit. I would support seeking out how to improve our internet service. There may be T's and I's to be crossed and dotted of how we do it, but I don't see a problem with putting an RFP out to the companies who are in the market for that and letting them come forward with a proposal. But if that is not viable, then so be it. But I still think we need to upgrade our service. We need to improve upon it, and we need to look at how we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I might just add that, as has been mentioned, a number of other municipalities, in fact, the majority of other municipalities in the CRD do have fiber service, and I do know that in the past, the providers did approach the municipalities. I don't know if that was because in some cases municipal infrastructure was involved, but there was that interaction, and has been commented by my colleagues. We have the town of Sydney has been approached by providers in the past as well. So I'm very much in support of this motion. If nothing, then to have a meeting with the providers, and then information could be brought forward back to council. I'll turn to Councillor. Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you. I just, maybe it's because I just don't know enough about this. However, I'm just wondering it seems fairly straightforward to me based on what Councillor Rintoul has said, and what I'm coming to understand is I don't get the sense that, I don't see us putting out a request for proposals for internet for Shaw or TELUS to set up here. I mean, Shaw, it sounds like Shaw is already set up. If TELUS wants to maintain a high level of customers and service, I'm sure that they will follow suit. So I didn't see us doing a sort of going out for a request for proposals. What I would see it as something as simple as sending a letter to TELUS to say, hey, we're interested in getting this service. It's important to our community, especially since COVID and online business and online learning for students. It's a priority for our community. Please tell us when you plan on having it here, or if there's things that we can do to help move that along or facilitate that. And then another letter to Shaw to confirm what access is available in what parts of Sydney. And that's what I see happening. 2 letters go out that can be shot out in about an hour, get a response, and then feed that back to council and to the EAC to let them know this is what the plan is. But I don't see it being much more complicated than that myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor O'Keefe. I was going to suggest that we should be more looking along the lines of simply contacting Shaw and TELUS and asking them what their plans are in terms of availability in Sydney. If we want to add a couple of sentences about, we support it happening as soon as possible, I'm fine. An RFP would actually be quite a bit of work for staff, both writing it and evaluating it. And I don't think that we would be looking at asking them, like, we're not going to pay them to provide that service or do that upgrade, I don't think. So I think an RFP is definitely not the right way for us to go.
Okay. Councillor O'Keefe, you have something to add?
Yeah, just in light of the conversation where things seem to be going, and in order to provide staff with as much clarity, I wonder whether Councillor Rintoul might want to revise the recommendation slightly in terms of giving some more specific direction on staff as to how to proceed, rather than a general motion on supporting internet.
I think, if I might speak before Councillor Rintoul, that the motion is general enough, and staff have heard the comments from council, that I think we can move forward on this, but I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with that assessment. I think it's general enough that it gives staff the ability to reach out in a manner in which Councillor Wainwright had suggested. I also comment that perhaps reaching out to the municipality of Saanich might be of some benefit. Saanich just announced in the last couple of weeks with some fanfare in the press that one of the service providers will be adding fiber optic throughout their municipality. They talked about how they would handle that in this COVID environment. And the mayor of Saanich, Mayor Haynes, recognized and spoke to his community that this is a real benefit to the business community. That Saanich is happy to help support and make happen. And I don't mean through that, through any financial incentive to those providers. The customer base is here. It's about encouraging those providers to come into these markets and feel a need that our retail community, that our business community is telling us is very real. So I'll leave my comments there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have none opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Rintoul, will turn to recommendation 2, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item I'm going to move for information, and as I spoke at their last meeting, this was more of a general context statement, and so for council's information, move that the town keep costs down and limit demands on business during recovery.
Second.
Second, any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Wainwright.
Yeah, and just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if Councillor Rentoul might have any other info in terms of, did EAC members have any specific things that, or ideas in terms of keeping costs down or restricting demands? It seems to me that staff do a pretty good job at, and I think our council as well, as keeping costs down. We reduce taxes. So to me, it's sort of a normal part of our operating procedures. And when I checked with the chamber to see if they had any thoughts on what are the sorts of demands that businesses are talking about, they weren't able to shed any light on that. So I'm just looking to see if there's anything further that you could add to that, anything specific that they had mentioned.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, certainly this was the reason in which I've moved it is information for council, simply as I would describe it as more of a motherhood statement. And I know when I spoke at their last council meeting, there are certainly some entrepreneurs, some business owners on the committee who were very appreciative of the initiative with respect to taxation that this council has taken to help businesses through this difficult time. That statement was acknowledged. The concern was, do we see ourselves being potentially moved into a very regulated environment as a result of COVID, be it through provincial initiatives or municipal bylaws or municipal bylaw enforcement, and just more of a general discussion around businesses are cognizant of the current environment, and businesses want to work very carefully to see Sydney reopen safely. But let's give them the latitude to continue to do their good work in those environments. So again, motherhood statement, certainly no criticism intended on the part of the committee. It was more a marker for all of us to sort of ensure that we're keeping Sydney open for business as safely as possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate the spirit in which this was moved for information, but there are two types of motions. There are motions that are carried and acted on, and then there are motions that were defeated. There's no motions that don't get acted on, like, that it gets passed, but the expectation is nothing's going to be done with it. And I appreciate its motherhood, and it kind of would be hard to vote against keeping costs down, because that's something we do routinely anyway. And limiting demands on business, I mean, we try not to make frivolous demands on business, even when it's not a pandemic. The problem I have with the motion is, if we pass it, a year from now, I bet there's debate about whether we did it or not, because it is so vague, it's hard to know what it means. Like, does keep costs down mean they're asking us to make a commitment not to raise the commercial property tax next year? Does it mean that we're going to waive all permit and utility fees for the rest of the year? Probably not. But like I say, it's quite vague. And then even the question of during recovery, for some sectors of our economy, recovery is expected to be quite prolonged. For other sectors of our economy, they actually didn't have a big downturn. It's likely to be a shorter recovery. So is this intended to last until the last sector recovers? Or is it intended to last until the median business in Sydney recovers? Or, like I say, it's just really vague, and it's solely motherhood anyway. And I'm sorry, I just can't support it, because it's so vague that it's just way too open-ended. It almost seems pointless.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Rentoul?
Yeah, I won't argue the points and details there. I think we could kind of overthink the vagueness of it, and indeed, I've acknowledged it. It seemed like a motherhood statement from the committee. It's moved as a receipt for information, the same manner in which we receive correspondence, for example. You've already received the minutes. I'm certainly not going to be offended if you choose to vote against receiving this recommendation for information. I'll support it because we've already essentially received it in the minutes themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have 4 opposed. The motion is defeated. And we have the third recommendation, Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. And this may be equally unsuccessful. I do see it ties very nicely into recommendation 1 from the task force. And so I'm going to move this one as a receipt for information as well. Receipt for information, the recommendation that the town requests the Chamber explore with the SBIA the feasibility of creating a safe Sydney marketing campaign. And I'll speak to that if it's seconded.
Second.
We have it seconded. Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, in my mind, and certainly in discussion with colleagues, it tends to tie quite closely into the task force recommendation here around the Chamber and SBIA working together to communicate, a safe reopening theme, the Safe Sydney in the focus. And so I'd be happy to address it further under recommendation 1 of the task force report, and happy to receive it for information as moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
I guess I do like the idea behind this, and I don't know if we want, I guess if Councillor Rintoul is going to discuss it in regards to the other recovery task force items, but I guess what I see is the Chamber and the SBIA taking the lead role in these sorts of things. And I guess my observation is there's 2 recommendations for the task force. They're talking about a printed COVID-19 safety poster, and they're also talking about printed resource material, setting up a working group for cultural organizations. And I guess my reaction is that we've got 3 different projects, 3 different groups of people working on something that maybe should be combined. And Councillor Rintoul, is that what you were planning to speak to in the next part of this? I'm just wondering if we want to discuss this now, or you just want to.
If I could.
Yeah, this is right.
Sorry, if I could provide clarification. So the first recommendation from the task force can be reworded to be a safety, a Safe Sydney marketing campaign. That was the context that was actually the discussion was close to an hour in the committee meeting last week. And so I see that there is direct overlap, and there is direct overlap in the sense that the BIA, the executive directors of the BIA and the Chamber are on that working group, moving forward that initiative. So I see direct overlap, and I think, we can have some further discussion because I think there are some other considerations under that. So I just think it's appropriate to receive this for information, and we can have a full discussion. I don't think it's taking anything away from the discussion that the EAC had or them making this recommendation. I do have speakers, Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor Duncan.
I was going to say that I had no issue with the EAC motion as a motion rather than receipt for information. I appreciate the overlap with the task force's first recommendation, but the task force is talking about doing a poster and printed information, and a marketing campaign can be quite a bit broader in scope, radio advertising, stuff like that. So I felt that while they had a fair amount of overlap, I didn't have any problem with that going forward as an actual motion by council rather than receipt for information.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I was kind of divided on whether this one was redundant with the recommendation from the task force, and therefore it was, yeah, just a receive for information. There's no motion that needs to be made. It was going to be done anyway. Or, as Councillor Wainwright has pointed out, it's one that's quite a bit broader, in which case I'm almost wondering if the recommendation is just to ensure that rather than requesting the chamber explore with SBIA, but rather that working group in the the working group of the Recovery Task Force explore the Safe Sydney campaign, which would include the specific initiatives that they've already listed, but may be broader than that, rather than having specifically delegated something to only the chamber and SBIA, while the Recovery Task Force as a whole group is working on something else as well.
If I might comment again, the motion, the first recommendation from the task force doesn't include all elements of the campaign. It does refer to a poster, it does refer to a printed piece, but there was also discussion of there being a digital element to it. It was decided that in the motion that all of those components weren't in there. I think it would have been perhaps better descriptive to have called it a safety campaign, a safety marketing campaign, because I believe that's what it will be, but I go with the wishes of my colleagues. I turn to Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. So I'm quite happy with, as Councillor Wainwright said, with the recommendation in terms of the chamber with the SBA working on the Safe Sydney marketing campaign. What I was going to add to that is I think that they should also be looking after the other elements as well. They're essentially, they're in the same bailiwick of information. What I'm concerned about is a number of things. We're duplicating effort. We're creating additional committees and work that aren't required. We're also, we heard in public participation from Mr. Cavally about letting the people who know how to do this stuff. So both the SBIA was already well on their way to developing a campaign like this, along with the chamber. And so I guess what I'm concerned about is we're putting barriers in their way to moving forward by now making, having these other committees and working groups. In regards to the cultural recovery and resiliency.
Councillor O'Keefe, I'll interject. You're discussing the business of the next item.
I know that, but it's to me, it's all related.
Okay. I think we should leave it at that. We're discussing the actual elements of the other recommendations. I think you've made points with regards to your views on whether to receive or whether to go with the recommendation. I'll leave you to add additional comment if you wish, but I have spoken twice that there is further discussion to be had while the recommendations are made. Just as we've had ample discussion over these recommendations, there will be discussion of those recommendations, and I think any of the points that are being made now can be made at that time.
So I just want clarity on what is the motion on the floor then? Is it to receive for information, or is it the recommendation that's stated in the agenda?
The recommendation was made to receive for information.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further speakers? Councillor Fellow.
Thank you. I was just going to say, for us to just receive this for information, the overlap is that there's chamber and BIA representation in the task force. This information is going through, and we can have this further discussion once we get into the task force recommendations. But I think to take that statement right now, recommendation 3, and receive it for information is suitable for purposes.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? I'll call the question on the motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I'll now turn to Councillor Fallett, Council Liaison to the Recovery Task Force, to move the minutes and the 5 recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got the minutes from July 14 and July 28, and move the recommendation that the minutes be received.
Second.
Discussion, call a question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Then we go on to the first recommendation from the task force and the Economic Recovery and Resilience. Recommendation that a working group consisting of Morgan Shaw, Danny Warner, Glennis Cavers, and Alison Verhagen be established to develop a COVID-19 safety themed poster for businesses and a printed COVID-19 information resource piece for distribution to businesses and the public to be implemented as soon as practicable.
Second.
Discussion, did you wish to lead, Councillor Fallon?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And this is, I think, to ensure that we put out a consistent message throughout the town in the various facets of it. And I think if we come out with a poster, the message is out there, we keep going at it, and we'll see as we go through the other recommendations. The task force had really good conversation about where we thought this needs to go, where the information needs to go, and how it needs to come out. And I think that's the first part of it, is let's come out with a poster that has the same message going out, whether you are a visitor, a business, a resident, a shopper, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan and then myself.
Thank you, Councillor Follett, for describing what was discussed at that, and Mr. Mayor. I am, having heard Councillor O'Keefe's comments at the preceding discussion, I am in favor of the town continuing to be involved in such an initiative as part of the Recovery Task Force for two reasons. One is that not every business in town belongs to the SBIA or the Chamber, and that helps to ensure that all the businesses in town will be treated fairly to the same campaign. Similarly, they are not necessarily, a lot of the confusion the businesses have regards what is actually advice from the provincial and regional health authorities, and what is stuff that's coming off the news from other jurisdictions and best practices that like large corporations are putting in, cross-jurisdictional organizations. And so I think the town can be a really helpful sounding board there to make sure that when they come up with this campaign, they're not committing to things that are over and above what is actually required within our jurisdiction. And that can actually be enforced, because we do know from correspondence we get that people within the town are taking the initiatives upon themselves to try and report what they see as infractions to bylaw, with the expectation that the town is able to enforce things, and making sure that the town is in there to help make clear that not everything can be enforced and is not within our jurisdiction is going to be an important part of that. I know that safety is a good word to have in there, but there's a reason Bonnie Henry chose calm and kind as the first two words in her recommendations. And I think that as part of a good safety campaign to draw people back, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that for every person who wants there to be more safety before they can come out, some people will be defining that safety as the safety from not having people judging and reporting their every move based on their personal expectations. And so kind of making sure it's a campaign that takes into account making people feel comfortable coming out because they're not going to be policed and judged, as well as being kept physically safe.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. With regards to sorry, I have three things to say. The first is with regards to the committee choosing the working group. It was intentional in choosing the executive directors of the Chamber and the BIA because we knew that they would be involved in aspects of implementation. Ms. Cavers, Director of I'm not sure her exact title, I apologize, at Beacon Community Services, responsible for the Shoal Centre and actually services that are provided for COVID throughout the Capital Regional District, had made suggestions to the committee and wished to sit on this group to contribute some of the messaging that they actually make to seniors and others and families in the community. And as Councillor Fallett spoke to, this messaging is not just to businesses; it's to our community. The second is that, as I touched on earlier, the campaign is expected to be brought. And sorry, we also included Ms. Verhagen, our recovery director, town recovery director, on this committee because, again, it does involve our entire community. Ms. Verhagen has been part of the EOC throughout its length and initiated the start of the recovery measures and facilitated the transition to the task force that we have now. She is working 50% of her time on recovery measures, and I think given that there are provincial health orders and ministerial orders in place vis-a-vis municipalities and the public, that it is helpful to have Ms. Verhagen as a staff member on this committee. I do not think it's creating any barriers or burdens or delaying the implementation of what will come forward as a strategy. There's a lot of enthusiasm from these individuals and the balance of the committee to move forward as quickly as possible, and hence trying to move this forward with a special council meeting today. The third item is that there was some further consideration. Quite frankly, we ran out of time after 95 minutes at our committee meeting. We had a number of recommendations we didn't get to, and on a couple of the recommendations, we might have fleshed them out in some other ways. And so that as a follow-up to that meeting, I've met with staff. I've met with Councillor Fallett as our who joins me on the task force, and I've met with the chair of the BIA, Mr. Edgett, and there will be a motion arising after the second recommendation is made. So I do appreciate the comments that were made not only in public participation by Councillor O'Keefe and others with regards to effectiveness and efficiency in moving forward, and I think that could be addressed or certainly open for discussion upon these recommendations. But I'll turn back to my councillors for additional discussion on this recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe.
So it's still not clear to me what is then the status of the Safe Sydney marketing campaign. So all we did was receive that for information, and so I thought it was going to be made clear in this discussion how those two were going to work together. So are we saying that the Safe Sydney marketing campaign is going to be encompassed by what's under our R1? So I guess, so that's one concern for me.
So if I can answer that question first.
Okay.
So the answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
And how the discussion arose at committee on this initiative was looking at the resident surveys and the concern that, the concerns were expressed on a few fronts, that we want the community to be as safe as possible. Staff want that, council wants that, our public wants that, whether they're residents, whether they're businesses, whether they're community organizations. It was mentioned, or it was discussed at the committee meeting, that the BC's Restart program started on May the 18th, over 2 months ago. And that there was, I think, excellent initiatives that involved WorkSafe BC, that involved VHA for the implementations of reopening our communities, reopening our province, including very specific measures that businesses were required to take with regards to WorkSafe protocols and having them displayed to their staff and available for inspection. The town of Sydney EOC has seen nearly 200 of these work plans, and there are inspections in our community occurring by WorkSafe BC and VHA with regards to those protocols that have been put in place through the provincial health measures and the provincial ministerial orders. And so the campaign, the safety campaign was, well, after 2 months, we get a sense as we've reopened our community that some people are relaxing a little bit, whether they're businesses in their operations, whether they're public in the way they engage with each other, or whether how they engage with these businesses or organizations, and that it would be timely, given that we anticipate a second wave in the fall, to have a safety campaign in our community for businesses, for community organizations, for residences, where we do things like create a poster that reminds of the important measures, even though we hear them every day from Dr. Bonnie Henry, even though they're on our website, even though they're everywhere, we still need to remind people. And a campaign such as that, if it has a digital component, if it has a flyer component, a pamphlet component, there's discussion. It was to be included in this recommendation, but was included in the next recommendation, that the BIA is looking to reintroduce its information cart in different areas of the community, not just the waterfront, but in West Sydney, in Tallista Park, elsewhere, other neighborhoods, such that it can connect in distributing some of this safety information to our community. So I hope that describes a little more completely, or a little more fuller, that what's anticipated. And as I say, the makeup of the committee was such that we wanted to include those people for the reason that I gave. And I think the motion that will arise will speak a little bit more directly to implementation, the involvement of a particular organization, and or the possibility of a budget consideration. I'll let you continue, Councillor O'Keefe. I think you might have had another point.
Yeah, no, I guess, my concern is that from what I hear from the SBIA, they've been planning Safe Sydney campaign before the task force or the EAC started thinking about it. And I guess what I'm worried now is we didn't pass the previous recommendation to support them in that. Now they have to work with a working group who has to review, I presume, what they're doing. And to me, it's just, we're not making it easy for those people who are experts in this, which is the SBIA and the marketing, and the SBA and the chamber, who do this all the time. We should just be saying, yes, you guys know what you're doing. You don't, we've recognized in the past that we don't have the capacity within our town staff that have the expertise on economic development marketing. Members of council don't have that expertise. So, it's difficult for me to see the added value that we're adding by having this other working group imposed upon the SBIA and the chamber.
My last comment, Councillor O'Keefe, and then I'll turn to others, is that the executive director of the BIA and the executive director of the chamber supported this recommendation. They were a part of making this recommendation. And so I think if there were concerns to be expressed by those organizations, or some of the concerns that you mentioned, I think those organizations, and having met with the chair of the BIA, they're fully in support of this recommendation. Sorry, did I see a hand for Mr. Hagan?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to add a comment about the discussion at the Recovery Task Force Committee meeting. Not all members were in favor of a Safe Sydney marketing campaign. Some had concerns that the term Safe Sydney would be construed as meaning that the town is committing that things are safe when that's beyond our control. And just there's a comment in the minutes there that I think needs to be resonated. The town needs to be cautious on over-promising, stating it's not an objective we can guarantee. And while I think my interpretation of the intent of the poster campaign, or the poster to go up, was kind of a common message to be offered to businesses to display, was just to remind people what the basic health protocols are, recognizing that every sector of business will have their own requirements too, and that we can't make everybody follow exactly the same rules, because it does vary by sector. And some members of the task force were a little bit concerned about how a Safe Sydney campaign would be interpreted and carried out through the whole municipality.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. And I might add that, again, within the committee discussion, there were different viewpoints with regards to safety. So the discussion actually began with, we should actually brand Sydney as a safe community. And we turned from that, appreciating that that's a rather a claim difficult to make, given the current, the pandemic and the provisions that the provincial health orders and ministerial orders allow us to do. And so it turned from branding us ourselves as safe, as encouraging the community, and the theme, if I can call it that, was be responsible, keep Sydney safe. That's the thrust of the measures, and would be the lead the communication. So yes, there was different views in terms of there was actually discussion about could the town provide greater enforcement of safety measures in businesses or in community organizations. And we had it explained by our chief, former EOC director, and other staff that there are limitations in terms of the province has not provided enforcement powers to municipalities with regards to provincial health orders and ministerial orders. And that's why the province got WorkSafe BC and VHA involved. And so there was a full discussion in various aspects of safety, and I appreciate Ms. Verhagen bringing that part of the meeting forward that occurred as well. Councillor Fellett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, Ms. Verhagen is quite right, and I was going to address it. There was quite a broad discussion, and to take care that we weren't looking at guaranteeing a safe Sydney, and that what we have today isn't necessarily what we're going to have tomorrow or in weeks from now. Things can change on a dime. But I think what we were looking to do is, what the intention is, that we are layering the message of we all need to do our part. We have a high demographic of a vulnerable community, and so perhaps our standard of care and caution should be perhaps a bit more so than elsewhere. Not that anybody else should not have that same standard, but I think we need to be cautious that we're all part of keeping Sydney safe. And how do you do that? So here's the message for shop owners. This is the message for you as a consumer, as a resident, as a visitor, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll certainly go further into it in the second recommendation about part of the marketing and distributing the information. So one part of it was the poster, but there is the other part is to connect with people face to face and to interact with them. So I think the campaign has merit, and I think it's one that I hope council will approve and that we can go forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries. And I'll let you turn to the next recommendation, Councillor Fellett.
Thank you. Second recommendation from the workforce task force is that a working group consisting of B. Fallett, S. Duck, D. Calvely, and M. Shaw be established to develop a printed information resource piece with what the leading cultural organizations are offering to the public, and review the feasibility of the BIA information cart being set up to distribute this and other information to be implemented as soon as practicable.
Second.
If I might just interject for a moment before Councillor Fallett, is if I could just suggest a friendly amendment or an amendment proper. When I reviewed these minutes and I looked at this, I didn't catch one aspect of this, and there was certainly discussion of cultural organizations such as Mary Winspear, Artsy, etc. But really it was, this is to be our community organizations, and there was discussion about what is Panorama doing today? What is the library doing today? What is the Scholl Center doing today? What is the museum doing today? So it's really about the leading community organizations, and I might ask council to consider an amendment to change that word leading cultural organizations to leading community organizations.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, the mover and seconder. I'll turn to Councillor Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, just to update council on this, I have reached out to the library, the museum, Shaw Center, Artsy, Panorama, Mary Winspear. And what I would also like to include in all of this is which parks are open, the water spray park, is the community safety building accessible for people? Can they access and whatnot? All of those is what are they doing and what is open? Part of this is to assure the public that our community is functioning. It is open for business. It is open for visit, and what these organizations are doing to adhere to the COVID restrictions. And so in this recommendation, it talks about the cart, and we had quite a discussion about the cart, and I had talked to Mr. Robinson from Works Department. If we take this cart and say, go out to the waterfront walkway along Tallista or into West Sydney, is there a place? I mean, we don't want to have staff come and move the cart on a daily basis. If somebody is manning the cart, where does it go for overnight? So there are some practical restrictions about where we can take the cart. So then the working group looked at, is there another way to go out and about into the community to distribute this information, to be there, to answer questions and whatnot. And we thought about a retractable banner, such as you have for conventions, to sort of say the same thing that the Sydney kiosk, which is Ask a Local. And but that has a cost factor onto it. And so there's another part of the whole conversation is the dollars and how do we make things happen. But as far as this motion is concerned right now, the committee is working ahead, working and moving on. And we are meeting again tomorrow afternoon to sort of fine tune some of the things that we have done to date. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might just add to that and then turn to Councillor Duncan, how this arose out of initiatives that committee members submitted prior to our meeting. There was acknowledgement that all of these community organizations that I've mentioned, as we know, were completely closed during the worst of the pandemic, and all of these community organizations have reopened to some degree, and there's uncertainty and things unknown on the part of our community with regards to these organizations. It would be simple to say in normal times, well, if you want to know what was going on in the library, go onto the library website or go to Panorama's website. But these organizations are operating in very different ways than pre-COVID. And so it was felt that it would be helpful to bring this information to our community. And again, it might more properly have been described as a marketing campaign. It mentions a printed resource. But there was discussion of an insert in the Peninsula News Review. There was discussion of a brochure that would be handed over to the cart. There was discussion of digital components to this, whether it be the town website or other organization websites. So I would view it more as a marketing campaign rather than just a specific initiative. But that's a bit of a background how it arose and a bit more of a description of it as a campaign. I'll turn back to Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. So one thing I would like council to consider is the task force is inevitably going to come up with ideas and actions to bring forward to council for approval that have got a dollar attached to it. And then the question comes, how do we deal with that? We heard Mr. Calverley in his public participation was talking about funding the organizations such as BIA to do those things. Is that practical? So we also have to give some thought. And I'm prepared to, because coming out of this, there are going to be costs attached to it. And we could do, perhaps to get us over this right now, is I could make a motion later on after this one that we look at putting some dollars aside to make these things happen. But not everything is going to be an in-house and staff doable. It's going to have to, another organization is going to have to take this on, and we have to think about how we're going to handle that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? Two hands at the same time. I'll go with Councillor Duncan and Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually at first just had a bit of I think a point of order that the recommendation already says community organizations. So I think you moved an amendment there to change it from cultural to community, and I don't think we require it.
Sorry?
The recommendation in the agenda already has community organizations rather than cultural organizations. I thought that I'd heard you moving an amendment to change that to change the recommendation from cultural to community, but it already is a community, it says community, so I don't know if we need that.
Sorry, it says community in the motion?
Yeah, R3 in the recommendation.
No, we're on R2, Councillor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I agree with your observation, but
because I'm looking at leading community organizations, leading cultural. Okay, so I guess this just kind of comes back to then that I was thinking, wow, I'm really confused. We have like 4 initiatives that all kind of sound like the same thing. This explains why. Okay, thanks.
Okay, no, thank you, Councillor, for drawing attention to that. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
So same old thing for me. So duplication of effort in terms. So now it looks like, so we're going to have separate printed material for something on the cultural organizations. And while that's good, it's a good thing to have. When I did my walkabout of the around town the other day and talked to different hoteliers, one of the things that they wanted was they didn't know what the different organizations were doing. They didn't know that the Shaw Center was open, that the museum was taking reservations. So that's a good initiative. And it was something that the SBIA had been talking about doing. So I guess what my concern is that this is another printed product along with the posters, possibly another bunch of printed products to do with safe, a marketing campaign for Sydney. And so I guess I'm putting it back to the task force in the EAC we need to be looking broader. We're looking at things in piecemeal. If we're concerned about resources for staff, we're concerned about resources, time people have to spend on this, and looking at who are the best people that know this type of stuff. So it's a concern for me that we've got another committee working on another printed product, which could be, I think, incorporated into some of the other products we're talking about. I also hope that in terms of cultural organizations, most of those are covered by the CAG committee. So there would have been an opportunity there, instead of setting up a whole new working group, to tap into the CAG that exists already. The director of the SBIA is also manages that group, so that would have been an easy thing to do. Too late for that now, but perhaps they can ensure that they bring the CAG group together to get their input in that. So it would be nice to see these different campaigns come together. And a number of reasons, like I said, reducing duplication, saving money, but also if we want to have an effective communication and marketing campaign, any expert in that field will tell you it's important to have consistency in messaging. You want to have a common look and feel and a common approach to all of that. So that would be my advice in considering all of these different little pieces. We need to find a way to pull them together and have a common approach. Thanks.
Before turning to Councillor Duncan, thanks for raising CAG. And so I did have a meeting with Ms. Shaw, Executive Director and Chair of CAG. And the situation is the last regular meeting of CAG was late February, early March. They did try to have a meeting in July, and only 50% of the 16 members were able to attend because members were involved in their respective businesses or weren't actually involved in their regular duties at their respective organizations. And so it was felt that yes, the SEAG would be involved just because Ms. Shaw is involved and she is with the BIA and is with SEAG. So there will be a connection there, but again, I've spoken to it earlier. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies for my confusion earlier, but I'm hoping to try and turn it into a teachable moment. That I'm seeing, I think Councillor O'Keefe has points here in the duplication in that we've started with the individual initiatives that I'm worried are going to end up duplicating each other because they all kind of come under an objective that everyone has in their minds, but that hasn't been made objective, made concrete, with these as individual steps as part of the same campaign underneath it. That they're looking almost like there are several different campaigns, but in reality, they're all the same one. And the issue is we're trying to come up with a Safe Sydney campaign because we're worried people are getting slack. But the reason people are getting slack is that it's really exhausting. And this goes back to Mr. Cavalier's comments earlier about that the town's role needs to have a higher role in the mental health issues. Is whenever you want to go out now to go shopping, it used to be you just decided what you wanted and you went out, you went to the store, and if they had it, you bought it. But now you have to figure out, is the store open? Can you go there in person? Do you have to order ahead of time? What kind of PPE may you be expected to be aware when you get there? And on like that. And so I think what we're looking for is to try and make sure that people actually continue doing the things that we know they need to do. And also that people continue shopping, because we don't want them feeling just so burnt out that they give up on shopping as well. And we want people to behave safely when they use our parks, and we want people to be able to use our cultural and community facilities again. So what we're really kind of looking for is a unified campaign that doesn't have a poster that just says safety things, but that is, and each store it will be different, because each store is allowed, and the staff within them, they have different configurations, they have different products, staff have different comfort levels. And all we want to know usually when we want to go shopping now is, are they open, and what do I have to wear, or what do I have to do when I get there to obtain their services? And some stores are really good at that, and some stores are less good at making that clear up front. But if the campaign and the education around that is, look for the poster in the window, it will tell you, in this store, you will use hand sanitizer, you will be expected to wear a mask. In other stores, you know, we would observe distancing, mask not required, you know, or mask optional, or whatever. And just kind of making it a unified, easier experience that people know when they show up, they can just show up and do the right thing. And it's similar with using our facilities like the community centers and the libraries and even just the park, where instead of taking pictures of people as a gotcha and putting it in the media, the way some of our, you know, newspapers have done to try and make it look as though people are misbehaving, it's the idea that people just are used to being able to use things a certain way. And there's a certain barrier to trying to change it to the other way, that if it's not made very clear. And in our parks, we've got that for playgrounds right now, where it's, you know, you are expected, wash your hands before you arrive, wash your hands where you leave, try to maintain distance with kids, and away you go. But we don't have a similar sign that tells people what they're supposed to be doing if they meet their friends there for a picnic, or they meet their friends there to just have a chat. And so kind of narrowing it down to be, these are specific steps about how we are going to communicate that council either frees up resources or delegates to certain groups to do, or takes on pieces of that, would be the recommendations here. But I think making sure that task force is all has that unified vision when they go under it. And I don't know if we need to have, and then have each of that piece of that vision broken out into the recommendations. And I feel like that's almost what Councillor O'Keefe has been getting at all of this time, for my long-windedness.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. I think this is an incredible discussion that we've got here, and I thank everyone for the contribution. So the idea with the task force was to bring together various members of the community, such as members of SEAG and the BIA and the Community Association, Shoal Center, all of those, to bring them together, to work together, to come up with their needs from their own perspectives, but also the larger perspective of the community of how do we work through recovery? How do we as a community work together? Now, I'm prepared to make a motion after this one to look at providing some funding to pay for the projects that we've got coming out of this recommendation. But the question then becomes, as Mr. Calverley noted and Councillor O'Keefe was talking about, are we creating too many layers here to work effectively? How do we, as a committee, I'm not talking about council right now, but how does the task force as a committee, and then how does council get through the projects and the initiative it wants in the most time-effective and the most cost-effective manner that achieves the goals? Are we better off turning to an organization such as the BIA and giving them a sum of money to say, go through and do what you do best? Or do we continue with the task force as it is to come up with recommendations to bring to council and then sort out the funding for that?
Okay, we do have the motion on the floor, and I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor, but you're speaking again to a possible next motion and consideration. So we do have the motion on the floor with regards to a specific recommendation with regards to a campaign with regards to what community organizations are doing. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that I'm not opposed in regards to what this particular working group wants to, to put this information, but the issue is it needs to be incorporated, like Councillor Duncan said, and I said, into one strategy rather than a bunch of little things. So for that reason, I will oppose the motion because I think it's too piecemeal, and I've drafted another motion that leads more to what Councillor Fallett said about handing this off to the SBIA and the Chamber to lead this campaign with input from other organizations. So I'll hold that in abeyance for now, but I just want to let you know why I'm opposing the motion.
Okay, if I'll turn to Councillor Garnett now, and then I'd wish to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been listening for a long time, and I feel like we're getting a little lost in the weeds here to some extent. You mentioned Councillor O'Keefe taking walkabouts. I've done similar things, but I just observe, and I think we're giving a little less intelligence to our community than they deserve. For the most part, what I'm witnessing is that people leave their home, they have a mask, they have hand sanitizer, they have everything they might need to go into a store to shop. They're not going blindly going, oh, I should have brought this. That's not what I'm seeing. That's not what I'm seeing is happening. So I think that the recommendations being made here are good ones. You're dealing with one thing in terms of safety, and that's just reiterating all the things we already all know. And even if you lived on another planet and just came back, you now know what you need to do. There's no way anybody doesn't know what they need to do. But it's good to have something in a store window or something around town that just reiterates, yes, this is what we need to do. Let's not relax. Let's keep to the stringent way we've been living because it's worked. And I think also the possibility of having information out there in carts that allows people to know what places are open, where they can go to help keep the businesses functioning and all the various community organizations functioning in a positive manner is a good step forward. And you can speak to what, in terms of the BIA and what they can bring to the table, but we already have organizations on this task force, and we brought them in there for a reason. is we have a wide broad of people with knowledge that helps to bring things together and have a focus. They bring recommendations to council. I think that was the whole purpose of doing that in the first place. So I just feel like we're just kind of getting a little lost out there, and we're losing the specific focus of what this particular recommendation is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think I concur with Councillor Garnett in the sense that the task force, given its composition, are agreeable to working together in these small groups. I expect in the interest of expediency, to try and move forward each of these marketing initiatives, and the current one aimed towards community organizations. Well, I completely understand the point that Councillor Keith was making. I think I just take it that this is coming from the group that we established to make recommendations of this nature, and they want to get lean and mean in these smaller groups and be able to move forward expeditiously. So I'm going to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. I'll turn back to Councillor Fallon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So coming out of that discussion, I would like to make the motion that the Sydney BIA, with involvement from the 2 task force working groups, implement the Safe Sydney marketing campaign and the community organizations marketing campaign and report back to the task force. And part B is that the town provide a budget to a maximum of $3,000 to the Sydney BIA for the 2 marketing campaigns, with a report back to the task force.
Second.
We have a seconder. Councillor Fallon?
Well, I think I've essentially said what I need to this just prior to that. We need to look at a way of funding the projects. This is a recommendation that we've got a project in front of us right now, and we need to put some dollars towards it and hand it off to the Sydney BIA. Now, my only question, and you met, I believe, with the chair of the BIA today, Mr. Mayor, are they in a position to take this task on?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, they are. And to speak to, as I touched on earlier, that that the committee didn't look through the full implementation, and it discussed and knew that the BIA was going to be involved in certain aspects of the implementation, but really this is giving the responsibility for implementation to the BIA on those 2 particular campaigns. The working group members want to be involved, and the BIA and the Chamber are happy to have them involved for their input. And with regards to budget, Mr. Edgett, chair of the BIA, indicated to me, and as did Morgan Shaw at the committee meeting, that the BIA does have some unspent marketing funds due to COVID that it could put towards these initiatives and would be happy to do so. However, in discussion after the meeting, we appreciated that that these initiatives are community-wide. So, for example, if there's going to be a safety campaign for businesses and patrons, it will be for all businesses in Sydney, not just the downtown. And that while CAG does have a part of its BIA budget, this is unique. The circumstances of COVID shutting down all of these community facilities, and now they're reopening in different ways. It requires significant communication, or we think this type of communication will be beneficial to the community, and that it's suggested that the town, contribute partially to that campaign, and the BIA does have funds. I didn't mention a particular dollar amount, or we didn't discuss a particular dollar amount in my meeting with the BIA chair today, but they do have some funds, and I think the nature of the campaign, we could choose $5,000. I think the wording of it be to a maximum of $5,000 or $3,000. that they're not looking to spend a specific amount yet. They don't know the specific amount they will spend yet, but that would give them some room. Councillor Rintoul, then Councillor O'Keefe, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to hear the first part of the motion again, but I think in terms of the spirit of what's suggested and what I understand, that it would be fair to provide some funds towards this endeavor, given as been noted in the conversation that it's not necessarily under the purview of the SBAA to be addressing this. We're looking to them to do this work somewhat outside of their wheelhouse, which they've embraced. Certainly on social media, they've done a fantastic job, around COVID and providing information both to residents and to businesses. So I think I agree with my colleagues. They're very well suited to carry on with this, and I'd like to see them offered some support. I like the language suggestion the mayor has added there, not to exceed, and so at not to exceed $3,000, I think I'm comfortable with that. And if not at this moment, then perhaps if you would be agreeable, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to hear the first half of that motion one more time, please.
I'll turn to Councillor Fallett if you have the motion. I did provide staff with a copy of it as well.
That the Sydney BIA, with involvement from the 2 task force working groups, implement the Safe Sydney marketing campaign and the community organization's marketing campaign and report back to the task force. The second part was that the town provide a budget to a maximum of $3,000 to the Sydney BIA for the 2 marketing campaigns with a report back to the task force.
Okay, so I stand corrected. That maximum was already in the wording. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Fallett, for reiterating the motion. And I'm comfortable. All it's doing is reaffirming the 2 motions we've already passed and providing somewhat of a budget for them to move forward. So I'm comfortable with the motion. Thank you.
I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my only hesitation with the second part of the recommendation is because I like to lean on the expertise of our staff, I would like to know where we might be able to draw the funds from, and if Mr. Hiscock could, give us some kind of an idea as to what that would look like.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, we anticipated that question, or I anticipated that a question might be asked around where financing might come from. Certainly, if council passes that, I'll have a discussion with Mr. Hiscock. I can guarantee you that we'll have the money somewhere, and we'll be able to report to council in terms of where that money will be funded from.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I think I might actually be in agreement with this one. I appreciate Councillor Fallett's efforts to try and pull these different threads together. So the way I understand it is that the SBIA would be taking the lead on these things. So that would, I think, deal with my concerns about consistency of messaging and format, common look and feel to those marketing materials, and an opportunity to bring all of that information together in one package rather than having different sorts of things. So I'm supportive of that, and thank you for Councillor Fallett. The only thing I'm wondering about is in the motion you talked about coming back, reporting back to the task force. And I'm not sure what your intention was there. I guess what I was looking for was that we're giving the SBIA the green light to go ahead, work with these 2 groups and get on with it, rather than coming back to the task force, having to wait for another meeting of the task force to have their plans approved. So I guess I'm seeking some clarity on how you see that going.
Sorry, the intent is not for the BIA to bring back aspects of the marketing campaigns to be approved by the committee. It's okay. The committee has made the recommendation for these campaigns to occur, It is just tightening up the implementation. And speaking of some of the positives that you've mentioned with regards to this, it would just be reporting the completion of the campaign and
Sure.
perhaps metrics and that sort of thing. And then, of course, when it's received by the committee, information would, of course, then come back to council as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Turn to Councillor Fallot.
No, you took the words out of my mouth.
Thank you. Further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
And if I can, Mr. Mayor, I'll carry on with the fourth recommendation from the task force, is that mayor and council do walkabouts engaging the public and businesses regarding COVID-19 topics and distribute information pieces from the two working groups as appropriate.
Okay, Councillor Fallot, we're going to permit you to make recommendation 4 first, and then we'll go back and do recommendation 3. We appreciate that we've made 3 recommendations.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because we had a business arising, but the motion is moved.
Yes, no, I jumped the gun, sorry. That the town organize an initiative for virtual town hall meetings for the public with participants, including a mix of council members, town recovery team, and other staff and leaders from the community organizations.
Second.
Councillor Fallot?
Thank you. Yes, this came about with wanting to layer information and looking at different ways of getting the information out there, but not just getting information out, but engaging with the community, and looking at a variety of people who would be handing out that information or being part of that. So the virtual town hall meetings, I think, is awesome. We as council have done the virtual meet and greet, and this is sort of a version thereof. And it's just bringing the community together, bringing different partners in the community together as being part of handing out that information and looking at different ways of engaging with our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to add some is the idea, and we didn't flesh out the particular community organization leaders that would be involved, but for example, it might be someone from Panorama as well as somebody from Mary Winspear, as somebody from the Scholl Center, a couple of members of council, a member of staff, Ms. Verhagen from the recovery team, because questions regarding to COVID could be anything. And I think somebody may want to ask, how is Panorama safe? In their operation of their fitness program or their outdoor program for children or what have you. Or they may have a question about seniors, what senior services are provided at the Scholl Center. They may want to know about how they can engage with the town, given that we don't currently permit them, immediate access to the hall, but they can arrange meetings. So I think there's just a wide range of questions, and that if we put a mix of folks together in the community, including representation from council, it could be interesting community dialogue. We did have the experience of, a couple of previous town halls with council and staff, and had some success. Any further discussion or comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll go to the fourth recommendation from the committee or the task force, that mayor and council do walkabouts engaging the public and businesses regarding COVID-19 topics and distribute information pieces from the two working groups as appropriate.
Second for discussion.
Okay, Councillor Fallon?
Thank you. I brought this one forward because I thought back to when we were all doing our campaigning and the value of being out on the street and meeting people. And I thought, we're 2 years into our term and we've got COVID at the doorstep. And it's time to mix up how we've been doing things. And I think to go out and meet the public rather than having the public come to us, to council, even today with the restrictions of COVID, it's a different way of going about it. And I think it's important for us as leaders to to show ourselves, to be out in the community, and not just on Beacon Avenue. This is a part that really spoke to me, is we focus so often on our initiatives being on Beacon Avenue, and I think we need to go elsewhere throughout the community. My thought was, this isn't about all 7 of us walk en masse. Perhaps 2 of us, 2 or 3 together, some sort of promo in the media to say, you know, meet your counselors, they're coming to a neighborhood near you. Tuesday night at 7 p.m., they're going to be Resthaven and Bowerbank or whatever. But go out and just be where people are and talk to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do understand where Councillor Fallot is coming from, but I do have some reservations with this particular thing. And normally I would be all for it, given the normal circumstances. But I do see issues with us walking around in the community and engaging people. There would be many people who would be very uncomfortable with that, for starters. And the information pieces to be handed out, I don't know if somebody would want to take something from somebody else at this, you know, there's just issues with that as well. I was thinking maybe along the lines of the information pieces maybe being put in the next utility mailing. That could be something that maybe is a possibility, but just because I'm the person that just likes to observe people, it's my psychological background, and people, I think people would be very hesitant, even as their elected officials, to have us approach them. It's difficult, and I understand what you're saying, because I think it's a great idea under normal circumstances, and I would love to do it, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm making somebody feel uncomfortable or just feeling like we're maybe pushing it too much. So maybe an alternative would be to be at a specific location and people could come to us if they chose to, as opposed to it feeling like we're kind of imposing ourselves on them. I'm just the way I'm kind of thinking in terms of the present situation. I don't think we're quite there that we can do quite what you're suggesting yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, and then I wish to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not prepared to support this particular recommendation, and for some of the reasons, certainly that Councillor Garnett mentioned. Look, the previous recommendation was around adding additional town halls in a virtual format where we can safely have conversations with residents that want to reach out to us. And if we weren't in a pandemic environment, then it would be great to knock on doors and solicit input on different matters if the public are reluctant to come forward and approach council and public participation. Certainly, I agree with the sentiment there, but I think it may send the wrong message as well. I mean, we're not meant to be meeting in groups. Why would we encourage groups to meet in person on some street corner? We've got some pinch points in town. All of us have our constituents, and all of us are out in this community on a day-to-day basis. And so if there's an opportunity to provide some written material, if I put some in my suit jacket pocket, I'll certainly be prepared to share it if people are comfortable taking it. But I don't see organizing, street meetings as being appropriate at this time. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I support it in principle, and there's different levels we can do this. Quite frankly, and myself and having chatted with other colleagues, we are, as Councillor Rintoul has indicated, we are already out in the community, and I make a point of being in different neighborhoods, different parks, and different parts of the business community. I've been on Harbour Road. I've been in both sides of Sydney, West Sydney downtown. And I've actually found it interesting over the last, particularly since the restart in late May, how individuals that I don't know, either business owners, employees, or residents, are interested in having a little conversation and about what's going on in the town and sharing views. And so I think it can be done safely. The public is engaging numerous organizations, businesses, nonprofits throughout the community. But I leave it up to to individual councillors at the level to which they wish to be involved. Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you. I also agree with the sentiment, but I don't know that a resolution is required. And, you know, as has been mentioned, we're all in a number of different liaison committees, so we interact with a wide variety of people. I continue to meet with anybody, you know, have people contact me and want to meet for coffee at a distance and do that. I'm regularly out and about, just doing walkabouts in different parts of town to find out what's going on. And I think people will, that's just kind of part of our job, and we'll all do it to, you know, the level that we feel comfortable and appropriate to our circumstances. So I agree with the sentiment. I just don't know that, you know, we need a resolution to tell us what I think is sort of our job anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wainwright.
I'll kind of echo those sentiments. I don't have a problem if members of council want to do walkabouts like this, but we have different comfort levels on this kind of thing. And I don't think we should have a motion that basically says every member of council should be out there doing this. So I'm not opposed to anyone doing this, but I'm not going to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 5 opposed. Sorry, the motion is defeated. Thank you.
And the last recommendation from the task force is that staff issue a special COVID-19 edition of the Town Talk for September.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Fallot?
I think that's fairly self-explanatory, so I don't think I need to really add anything to that.
Very good. Thank you. Any discussion? I'll turn to Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess from a staff perspective, I just wanted to, I guess, make the point that, yeah, absolutely, certainly, staff would be prepared to focus on this and put something together for September. I see the notes in the minutes around a desire for the committee to be involved in sharing information and perhaps maybe taking it upon themselves to perhaps look at different sections of the Town Talk that they may want to focus on and contribute and would put that together. It is important to note that we're well into August, and it does take time to put these publications together, in particular for September. And you know, once we have it together, getting it to the printers, you know, it's another several weeks, etc. So it's something that certainly we would want to focus on and have happen in a timely way. I don't know if there was any discussion at the meeting about even having a potential working group associated with this that might look at what are the potential themes that we might be looking at for the special edition, because usually an edition of Town Talk is some 6 to 8 pages, and so we're looking at content here, and what areas are we focusing on, what should we be focusing on, what level of input does the task force want with respect to that special edition, etc., or is it being left completely up to staff? So I just wanted to make those points. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly. I'll turn to Mr. Hagan, then Councillor Fallot, then I wish to speak.
Sure, thank you. To Council, following up on Mr. Humble's comments just there, there is the next Recovery Task Force Committee meeting planned for next Thursday. So if Council makes a motion to this effect, a resolution to this effect, then those things could be discussed at the next Task Force meeting next Thursday. Thank you.
Councillor Fallot?
Thank you. Just some of the things that I was going to bring up for content would be such as our facility status update, looking at all of the groups such as the library, the Shoal Center, etc., where they are, what they're doing. Can you come into town hall? You know, what parks are, all of those sorts of things, I think would be an appropriate thing to put into the Town Talk for this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. To Ms. Verhagen's point and Councillor Fallon, specifics were discussed, but it wasn't framed within the motion. And one was the safety message: be responsible, keep Sydney safe. The second was there are good resources on the town website in terms of mental health resources or other resources, and it would be to include those. And then the third, as Councillor Fallon indicated, would be update along the lines of the community organization campaign elements of that. But the committee could certainly have further discussion on that. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Sorry, I'm just going to actually turn back to Mr. Humble. Would it be more appropriate, Mr. Humble, appreciating where we are in August already, to amend it from September to the earliest opportunity? I just don't want to.
Yeah, I appreciate the suggestion, Mr. Mayor. I think it might be appropriate. I just know right now we are focusing on. We have the extension. We had been given an extension to the completion of the annual report. We're just finalizing the annual report publication right now, and given some of the vacation time that I know is being taken by some of the staff that are directly involved with respect to the putting the town talk together. If that's possible, I think we would endeavor to have something out by September, but I think if that was modified, it would give us just that extra level of flexibility.
Yeah, we haven't normally had fixed dates for town talk, and so I'll leave it to council's wishes. Okay, we have the motion on the floor as is, so I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And then we had two items of new business. Councillor O'Keefe, I'll turn to you in the first item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just one of the things that caught my attention in the minute, I believe it was for the July 14th minutes, where there was reference made to the accommodation industry and some concerns in that sector. And we know that that's an industry that has been impacting significantly by the pandemic. And it's something that I did this past week as well, again from the SBIA and again from different hoteliers around town. And the question I was asked was, how are we doing in regards to enforcement on short-term rentals? As some at council may recall, that it was in 2018 that short-term rentals were made illegal, well, some of them anyways, and staff were to undertake a soft enforcement push in 2018. Around this time last year, July 2019, several hoteliers sent letters to council asking us to initiate enforcement of short-term rentals. And they had outlined their concerns at that time. And at our September council meeting last year, staff indicated that although the intention had been to start enforcement in 2018, that had been delayed as a result of the retirement of the town's bylaw enforcement officer and the challenges associated with short-term rental enforcement. Subsequent to that, I believe council approved a budget item to facilitate the enforcement for short-term rentals. When I checked with staff this week to see how we're doing on that, I was advised that they had been unable to make any significant progress on the enforcement of short-term rentals due to COVID. And although we had been expecting a report in September, and that they were unable to guarantee that any action would be taken prior to then, because, well, they've obviously been busy with COVID-related issues. I guess I'm wanting to bring it forward to council. I don't know if you want a motion to discuss, but just to get a sense from council whether we might want to provide some more specific direction to staff in terms of helping them to determine priorities in in this environment. What I've heard from also the chamber in regards to short-term rentals and the hoteliers is what's critical is that this is the time, this is the tourism season, it's summer. And so this is the time that we should be focusing in on enforcement action. The other thing that I didn't realize is that according to the chamber, that now that a lot of destinations that people normally go to in the summer, such as Hawaii or Florida, a number of Canadian residents from the prairies in Eastern Canada, snowbirds often take flight to those warmer spots. And so they're now looking to Western Canada as sort of the hot spot, so to speak. And so the concern is that if we don't do something to enforce short-term rentals, that it's going to continue to impact the industry. So I wanted to bring that to council's attention. If council thinks that that we need to do something sooner rather than later, I'd be interested to hear your comments. If you want me to put forward a motion, I can do that.
Well, Councillor O'Keefe, if I might speak to your comments, we've certainly had short-term rentals come before council with particular motions and motions to staff and motions at meetings during earlier in the pandemic. And while a report was expected in the fall, and we may learn that the timing of that may be changed, but for reasons that you've indicated, council is going into its strategic planning in the near future, and short-term vacation rentals. Some discussion was had about possible other directions with short-term rentals from our last council discussions and motions. And so if staff is unable to do the level of enforcement that they anticipated because of COVID, I don't know that a council resolution, if that's what you're proposing, is going to change that, or if you're considering something else. But I think to bring the topic of short-term vacation rentals for discussion before council based on a comment in the minutes, the committee did not bring forth a recommendation or express a specific concern. I think we might more properly deal with it at our next strategic planning meeting. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually prefer that we deal with this at a regular council meeting because this is a bit out of the blue, and I would like to have the context from staff. They're basically them telling us, what the issues are in terms of the staff resources being available to do the enforcement. I guess the last thing I'm going to say, I did not anticipate that the special council meeting was going to go on this long, and I apologize, but I've got another meeting at 5:30. I'm confident that the rest of council can handle things after I leave, but I am going to have to leave. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I might turn to staff, and again, as I indicated, we do have an outstanding council action item whereby we have asked staff for a report to come forward in the fall, and I might just ask Mr. Humble what time, the timing of what we may look to for that report to come to council.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, indeed, I can't speak to the exact timing, but yeah, we will bring a report forward in the fall. Speaking to staff resources right now, and I know there has been some correspondence between staff and Councillor O'Keefe regarding this. I mean, the clear indication is that we have one bylaw enforcement officer, one regular full-time bylaw enforcement officer, and that bylaw enforcement officer has been focused on a daily basis on COVID-19 and wellness safety checks and the focus in dealing with our unsheltered vulnerable population. And this is a daily thing. We've heard that from the community that this is a concern. We've heard from council that that's a concern, and that's been our focus. So really, we haven't, amongst the other regular day-to-day bylaw enforcement issues that the bylaw enforcement officer has to deal with. So staff are aware of this, the need to undertake this. We're fully cognizant of it. We will be reporting back to council once we're able to undertake that. But we're certainly haven't forgotten this one.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that then.
And did you have a second item, Councillor Keefe?
Yeah, it just had to do with, I don't know if it's called governance or, I just noticed in going through the different, the minutes, that there's
We're just waving goodbye to Councillor Wainwright. Thanks for joining us today, Councillor.
just a bit of a crossover between the EAC and the task force. And just a bit of feedback from a couple of participants that it's sometimes difficult to know who's doing what in terms of task force responsibilities and EAC responsibilities. And so I guess, the other thing that I noted from the task force minutes was that they didn't have a lot of time to delve into some of those other important issues like community resilience, mental health, those sorts of things. And so I wonder, just a question, whether any thought had been given as to whether maybe the task force would devote more of their time to those other issues that haven't been able to focus, and perhaps leave more of the economic recovery things to the EAC. So just wondering if there any thought given to that.
Well, I might turn to Councillor Rintoul if he has comment with regards to EAC. For myself, with regards to the task force, yes, as I indicated earlier, there was other business on the agenda, other considerations, and quite frankly, we ran out of time. We are having another meeting, and we'll pick up where we left off. We moved 6 recommendations forward today, which includes very specific actions. We moved 5 recommendations forward today. One did not pass, and that we've seen from receiving the EAC minutes today something substantive with regards to internet and cell phone, and that's gone forward. And the respective organizations have their terms of reference, so while there might be a little overlap with regards to the economic component, I think we saw a little bit of that overlap today, but I don't think it's impairing the work of either committee, and personally would be content to leave the terms of reference as they are today going forward, so that we can move to as many actions as we can. Councillor Rintoul, did you wish to comment at all?
No, I think I'll concur with that assessment. Ultimately, the terms of reference for the EAC are very much referrals from council, and so council referred to the EAC some time ago to focus specifically on recommendations, under its realm of economic diversity and economic development, and so you've seen some feedback provided from the EAC in that area. I don't think they're done with that, but my suggestion would be to avoid any duplication, would be moving forward. And in general, we want to make sure that we're very specific around our requests of the EAC. And so I think they've got, I know there's another meeting scheduled on their calendar. I think we'll see some more recommendations from council, to council, but that following that, they would be open, I'm sure, to address further specific recommendations from council if we have any for the EAC. So for now, in my mind, it's working, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. And I'm just wondering, what is there perhaps a protocol on the task force that if economic issues, recovery issues come up, would those be directed to the EAC for follow-up or comment? Or I'm just wondering in terms of the process, how those sorts of things are working in order to avoid duplication.
You know, if I can turn, thank you for the question, Councillor. If I can turn to Ms. Verhagen's initial recovery report that came to Council some time ago now, and it talked about recovery, and when it talked about actions and implementation, it talked about various resources, and it talked about staff resource, it talked about EOC resource, it talked about community organization resource, and talked about volunteer resource, and so it was known in emergency planning and in the recovery aspects of emergency planning that when you are doing those sorts of measures, that you look to those various resources. I would add to that, as a pigeonhole, if you will, the committees that we have, whether they be EAC or APC, and we have drawn resource from, from those committees to date. So I appreciate your comment, but I think I think what we have is working for the moment.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, so we've covered those two items of new business. We're left with a motion to adjourn, please.
I move adjournment.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, colleagues. Have a good afternoon.